Okay, today we're going to talk about linear equations, more about linear equations. We have point-slope form. Point-slope form is very straightforward. As long as you have a point and you have the slope of a line, you can write it in point-slope form. Now, notice this y and this x stay the same. You do not substitute for x and y. This x1 gets substituted here, and my y1 gets substituted here. And whatever my slope is, I substitute here for m. Alright, when you're writing an equation given a point and a slope, you want to look for your x1 and your y1 and your slope. Since the line passes through the ordered pair -4, 1 and has a slope of 2/5, I can write this equation by substituting my -4 in for x1, 1 in for y1, and my 2/5 in for my slope. And it will look something like this. Y minus, since my y1 is 1, it will equal my slope, which is 2/5, times x minus that x1, which is a -4. Now the only thing is, I don't want to leave this kind of messy, so I'm going to clean that up. I'll rewrite my equation as y minus 1 equals 2/5 times x plus 4. Okay, remember that a negative and a negative make that positive. Alright, when writing an equation given 2 points, the first thing I need to do is find the slope. After I find the slope, I want to pick a point for my point-slope form. And again, it doesn't matter whether I use my first point here or my second point here. As long as I put one of the points in, I'm fine. Then I want to substitute the slope and a point into my point-slope form. Alright, so let's start with the equation in point-slope form. Point-slope is y minus y1 equals my slope times x minus x1. Alright, the first thing I want to do is I want to find my slope. We'll go ahead and label our points x1, y1 and x2, y2. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and find our slope. Remember, your slope is your change in y, y2 minus y1, over the change in x, x2 minus x1. Go ahead and substitute in. My y2 is 8, and my y1 is 2. So I will substitute in 8 minus 2 over my x2, which is 5, and my x1, which is 3. So 5 minus 3. Here, my slope is going to be 8 minus 2, which is 6, over 5 minus 3, which is 2. When I simplify 6 over 2, I get 3. So I have a slope of 3. Now that I have my slope, I'm going to substitute my slope in for slope into my point-slope form, and my x1 and y1 into my point-slope form. I will get the equation y minus 2 equals my slope of 3 times x minus 3. Okay? You can also use this ordered pair with my slope. And I'll show you that. You don't need to do both of them, but I'll show you what it would look like. My second equation would be y minus 8 equals my slope of 3 times x minus 5. Either of these would work, this one or this one. Alright, when we're looking at standard form of a linear equation, the standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now a, b, and c must be integers, and a and b cannot be 0. also a needs to be positive. It's okay if a is 0 or b is 0, but they both can't be 0. When I say that a, b, and c must be integers, that means they cannot be decimals or fractions. Okay? Please notice also that x and y are both on the same side of the equation. Alright, writing this equation in standard form. Remember, my standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now, if you notice, I have a fraction as my slope. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of that. In order to get rid of that fraction, I want to use this denominator, 5. If I multiply the entire equation by this 5, the 5's will cancel and leave me fraction free. Alright, so to begin with, I want to multiply this term by a 5. But to be fair, I must multiply all of my terms by the same number. Alright, that is going to give me 5y equals this 5 divided by this 5 gives me a 1. So I will have a negative 3x plus my 5 times my 3 is going to give me 15. Alright, I've taken care of the fraction. Now I need to get my x value on the left with my y. Okay, in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add 3x to both sides. So I can have it in ax plus by equals c form, I'm going to put my x value first. So 3x plus 5y will equal, notice these are opposites so they cancel each other out, and I am left with 15. This is my standard form. Notice that I have my x and y's on the same side. A, b, and c are all integers, and a is positive. Okay, now we want to write this equation in standard form. Notice that I have decimals this time. Again, I want to get rid of those decimals. In order to do that, I essentially need to move my decimal one place to the right in each of these terms. In order to not change the 4 and the 2, but to move that decimal, I'm going to multiply all terms by the 10. Multiplying by the 10 keeps my digits the same, but it moves my decimal place 1 point. I use 1 0 for every digit to the right of the decimal place. All right, now remember, we have to be fair and multiply all terms by the same number. Once I multiply by 10, I will get 10y on the left. That will equal 10 times 4.2 is 42x, plus 10 times 7.9 is 79. Okay, now that I have my decimals that are gone, I want to go ahead and I want to get this x to the other side with my y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 42x from both sides. On the left, since I want to have my a first, remember my standard form is ax plus by equals c, and I want my a first, my ax first, so I'm going to go ahead and write this as negative 42x plus that 10y equals, these are opposites so they cancel out, and they will equal 79. Now, here's the problem. Remember we said that a cannot be negative. So what I want to do is I want to multiply the entire equation by a negative 1. By doing that, this negative 1 times the negative 42 changes it to a positive 42x. This negative 1 times this positive 10y will change it to a negative 10y. That will equal, and this negative 1 times the positive 79 will change that to negative 79. So essentially, by multiplying by the negative 1, all we did was change from negative to positive, from positive to negative, and from positive to negative. We just changed every sign in this equation to get this equation in the proper standard form. Okay, in order to graph an equation using the x and the y intercepts, we want to remember that when a graph crosses this x-axis here, the y value is 0. Right? So to find the x-intercept, we simply plug in 0 for y. Now, the same thing is true when our line crosses the y-axis. On the y-axis, my x value is 0. So we would substitute 0 in for x. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at the x-axis. So here, remember, when the graph touches the x-axis or crosses the x-axis, the value of y is 0. So I'm going to replace this y value here with 0. All I do now is I solve for x. Here, 3x is going to equal, since 5 times 0 is 0, it will equal 15. 3x will equal 15. Alright, to get x, we want to divide both sides by 3, and x will be 5. So my x-intercept is going to have an x value of 5 and a y value of 0. Let's do the same thing to find our y-intercept. We want to take this 0 and substitute in for x. So we're going to rewrite our equation. 3x plus 5y equals 15. We want to go ahead and substitute the 0 in for x. And again, 3 times 0 gives us 0, so we will have 5y equals 15. To get y alone, we will divide both sides by 5, and y will equal 3. So our y-intercept will have an x-coordinate of 0 and a y-coordinate of 3. What we want to do with this information is plot these points. So my 0, 3 will be 0 along the x-axis, so I won't move here, I'll stay at 0, and I'll go up 3. Plotting that point here. Now let's look at our second one, our x-intercept. Our coordinates will be 5 along the x-axis and 0 up or down. So I will move 5 along my x-axis, and I will not move up and down since our y value is 0. So plotting that point there. Now, in order to graph this, we only need 2 points to graph a line. So from here, I will connect my points to create that line. Now make sure that you label your ordered pairs. This point is 0, 3, and our x-intercept is going to be 5, 0. Okay, remember we have 3 forms of linear equations. We have slope-intercept form, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. We want to use this form when we know the slope and we know the y-intercept. Our second form is point-slope form, and again we want to use this form when we know an ordered pair, an x1 and a y1, and we know our slope. The third form we've talked about is standard form, and standard form is ax plus by equals c. Remember, a, b, and c are all integers. Both a and b cannot be 0, and a must be positive. Alright, now we want to look at graphing lines parallel to a given equation or a given line. Here, if you notice, this first line in y equals mx plus b form has the same slope as this second line. The lines are parallel, they will never touch. They are always the same distance apart. In order to do that, we must have the same slope. So here, our first slope will always equal our second slope. Our y-intercepts cannot be the same. If they are the same, then our lines will be exactly the same. Looking at perpendicular lines, when we're writing equations of lines that are perpendicular to another line, our slopes are negative opposites. Okay, they are also reciprocals of each other. So what I mean when I say negative or opposite is if you look at the blue line, this equation, it has a negative slope. It is also relatively flat. Looking at the red line, we have a positive slope and it is extremely steep. So we know that our two slopes must be negatives or opposites of each other, and they need to be reciprocals. So if I have this slope, say here that m equals negative 1/2, then that means the slope of my other line must be its opposite, so it will be positive, and then I'll reciprocate. So I will flip these and make it 2/1. And again, when we simplify, our slope will be 2. Alright, here we want to, in point slope form, write an equation of a line that passes through the ordered pair 3, 5 and is parallel to this equation, 2x plus 5y equals 4. Since I'm going to write this in point slope form, I know that my point slope form is y minus y1 equals slope times x minus x1. I will use 3 as x1 and 5 as y1 when I'm writing my equation. In order to start, I need to find my slope. The easiest thing to do would be to take my standard form and change it into my slope-intercept form. And remember, your slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And that will give me my slope. All I want to do is move my 2x to the other side, and I will do so by subtracting. So 2x from both sides leaves me with 5y equals negative 2x plus 4. And again, to get y alone, because if you notice there is no coefficient with y, I want to go ahead and divide both sides, and I mean all three terms. Since there are two terms on the right, I need to divide both terms by 5. When I do that, I get y equals negative 2/5 x plus 4/5, or 4/5. Now, it's okay that I have a fraction as my y-intercept and a fraction as my slope. Since I'm writing a line that is parallel, an equation of a line that is parallel, I know that I want my slopes to be the same. So in my first equation, my slope is negative 2/5. That means in my new equation, my slope will also be negative 2/5. So when I rewrite the equation using the point slope form, I will write y minus, remember my y1 is 5, that will equal my slope, which is negative 2/5 times x minus, and my x1 is 3. So here I have the equation of a line that is parallel to 2x plus 5y equals 4, and it passes through the ordered pair 3, 5. Perpendicular to the equation y equals negative 4x plus 2. Here we want to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form that is perpendicular to the y-axis and passes through the point -2, 5. Remember that your slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Now, since we're dealing with a line that is perpendicular to the y-axis, let's go ahead and draw a coordinate plane. Here we have the y-axis, the x-axis. Since our line is going to be perpendicular to the y-axis, here's my y-axis, perpendicular means it intersects the y-axis at a 90-degree angle. This line is going to pass through the point -2, 5. So here, all I really need to do is plot this point -2, 5. So here's -2 on the x-axis and 5 on the y-axis. So here's that ordered pair -2, 5. Since this line is going to be perpendicular to the y-axis, it's going to run parallel to the x-axis and through this point -2, 5. So my line is going to look like this. There, my line's not so great, but you guys can see that it is perpendicular to the y-axis and parallel to the x-axis. The equation of this line then is simply going to be y equals this value of 5. Since there is no slope, we're going to have y equals, our slope will be 0 times x, or 0x, plus 5. The 5 is my y-intercept, and my line, since it's flat, it is just a horizontal line, has a 0 slope. In order to simplify this, or when I simplify this, I end up with this equation here. So y equals 0 times x is 0, and I don't need that. So then I'll have my positive 5, or simply y equals 5. The last thing is I have a few questions that I would like for you to try. There are 5 questions. Go ahead and try these on your own and bring them in tomorrow for us to review.